tonight on The Readout.
So there are 5 people taking the Fifth Amendment, like you see on the mob, right? You see the mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
So guess what Trump did today if you said he pleaded the Fifth? You're correct. 1,000 points for you. Also tonight, the MAGA enablers are all on the same page about the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago. They have no idea what the evidence is, but they firmly believe it was planted by the FBI. Plus, why voters need to pay attention to the critical position of Secretary of State. Republicans in yet another state have nominated someone who seems eager to overturn results that she doesn't like. Good evening. Jason Johnson in for Joy Reid, and we begin the readout tonight with the latest on the FBI search at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. While Trump and his allies have been raging, the Department of Justice and FBI have remained conspicuously quiet. Here's what we have learned about the weeks and months leading up to the search. According to new reporting, the federal authorities grew increasingly concerned that Trump, a man known for, skirting the law for the last 40 years, and his lawyers had not returned all of the classified material that he had carted off with him when he went scurrying down to Florida after he was booted out of office by Joe Biden. According to the Washington Post, officials, quote, became suspicious that when Trump gave 15 boxes of items to the National Archives about 7 months ago, either the former president or people close to him held on to key records. Trump attorney Christina Bobb, the former OAN reporter who helped spearhead the Arizona recount, told NBC News that Trump's legal team were in discussions with the Justice Department this spring about records stored at Mar-a-Lago. Bobb, who was present when the FBI arrived, along with a number of other lawyers, said the agents took 12 boxes of material. Trump and his lawyers received a search warrant for his estate and the manifest of the materials the agents gathered and removed. He knows what they took, but have so far refused to make that public. And that's no coincidence. It allows the former president and his followers to dishonestly accuse the FBI, the same agency responsible for capturing the Oklahoma City bombers, Boston Marathon bombers, and some of the world's child predators, of planting evidence.
Do I know that the boxes of material they took from Mar-a-Lago, that they won't put things in those boxes to entrap him? How do we know? Their lawyers weren't allowed to see the boxes go.
They didn't allow anybody on the Trump side into Mar-a-Lago, so we have no idea whether or not they planted evidence.
Yes, that's exactly right. And Newt, I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, I wish I trusted our law enforcement. You need some form of law enforcement to have a civil society. But I'm right with you. I say, they're planting evidence.
Quite honestly, I'm concerned that they may have planted something.
It's amazing to me. Charlie Kirk always trusts law enforcement when they're killing black people, but not when they're investigating Trump. This search has left Trump's supporters not just triggered, but also paranoid. Sources tell Axios that people in Trump's circle are speculating about which close aide or aides flipped and provided additional sensitive information to the FBI about what former President Trump was keeping at Mar-a-Lago. What's missing in their defense of the president is that he was engaged in for years, if not decades, of legally questionable behavior. So when they say if they can do it to him, they can do it to you, what they leave out is the fact that he may have engaged in illegal activity. So, yeah, if you break the law and steal classified material and lie to the IRS or defame a woman who accused you of rape, the feds are probably going to eventually want to talk to you. What they are also glossing over is that back in 2018, after calling for Hillary Clinton to be jailed, Trump himself actually signed the law that stiffened the penalty for the unauthorized removal and retention of classified documents from 1 to 5 years. This is what we call the find out phase. Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who is not far from Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach. Vaughn, it's great to talk to you. I'll start with this. I have been around Trump rallies. I have been around the hospital when Trump had COVID. What is the mood like on the ground? Is it a clown car? Are people praying? Are they yelling at reporters who have the audacity to try to see what's going on? What's sort of the feeling in around the area of Mar-a-Lago?
Jason, there were several hundred folks who were here yesterday. Actually, when I flew in overnight to make my way here, there was a gentleman who was sitting next to me that was flying in from Georgia with his Trump gear on to come in what he considered the defense of the former president. And I think that is what is important about these last 48 hours. When we put it into the context, the Department of Justice has still not officially commented or provided any information. We saw Christopher Wray, who was in Nebraska today, say that he could not comment on any investigation here. And what has happened as a result of that is that the Republicans have essentially filled that void here. You often hear conspiracy theories coming from the Donald Trump corners of the right-wing politics of today. But this conspiracy theory that you mentioned here about the idea of planting material, that started at the top, Donald Trump, but then also echoed by the likes of U.S. Senator Rand Paul. Last night on Sean Hannity, you saw U.S. Senator Marco Rubio warn millions of Americans that they were going to be next, that they were going to have their social media accounts watched, and they were going to be targeted and potentially arrested for defending Donald Trump here. There is so much that has been unanswered by the Department of Justice and exactly what they were looking for. I think it's important to note that there were multiple boxes that had been removed previously this summer here from Mar-a-Lago. But then Donald Trump, one would assume, knew what other materials he had,
right,
and potentially other classified documents here. And ultimately, it is a matter of what was in those documents there. And that is what ultimately, at some point, we hope to understand and have a better clarification for from the Department of Justice.
NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much. Let's bring in Maya Wiley, former assistant U.S. attorney and current president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and Nick Ackerman, former assistant U.S. attorney and assistant special Watergate prosecutor. Maya, I'll start with you. The sort of timeline that Vaughn laid out there was interesting, that there were documents that were taken earlier, but they realized that Trump had other additional documents. I'm fairly confident that these weren't boxes that were marked like old VHS tapes or family photos, and they just kind of forgot where they were in the middle of the move after he had to flee the White House. So my question is, just from an investigative standpoint, what would be the logic behind someone holding on to additional documents that you know that the federal government and the archives are still looking for? Did he think they were eventually not going to ask him to return these things?
Look, he was on full notice, to your point, Jason, that the National Archives are saying these documents belong to the federal government. They do not belong to you, and it is unlawful for you to have them, and you have to return them. When they got the 15 boxes back, they alerted the Department of Justice because they already knew they didn't have all the documents. And what transpires over the past 7 months, and obviously we don't know all the steps, but we do know that there were efforts made, including FBI having just conversation with Donald Trump, with his lawyers about additional documents. So, what we have seen is, frankly, what is probably a lengthy process of trying to get the documents, knowing they exist, some documents, because there was some reason the National Archives said, hey, 15 boxes and we still don't have them all. Oh, and by the way, national security secrets. Things that the National Archives said in February would be very dangerous to national security if they became public. So when you look at this timeline, what you see is actually a timeline that suggests investigators did everything they could to get cooperation, and that there was something so dangerous, so concerning for them, that they were able to get an independent judge, someone who does not report to the White House, someone who does not report to Merrick Garland, has no reason to fear the loss of that position because of any of them, and doing something that is historic, which means no judge would do it lightly, has to be presented with evidence, by the way, evidence that the FBI is not going to share with Donald Trump's attorney, that they are likely to find something if they are given provision to search. That's what we're talking about, and that's what happened here. And one other thing, there's not one shred of indication that anything was planted. In fact, there are witnesses to the search in public reporting, to journalists saying, it looked pretty low key, they showed up, they did this, they did that. I mean, there's no, so they're actually trying to distract, deflect, and share essentially disinformation to try to undermine law enforcement on what is fairly serious concerns about documents that may have national security in them.